transactional, and I like to compare. It's just a part of my natural instincts is to think, well, if I do for them, then certainly good will come back to me. I do the same thing as it relates to the divine. I think, well, God, if I'm faithful to you, then certainly this kind of wisdom response, this ways in which I've been honoring to you, certainly what I will experience is good. Now, of course, this kind of thinking is far from the New Testament teaching of Jesus, where he promised us that it was going to involve some trials and some struggles and some pruning and some development and some hard times, some times when it would be tough for us to keep the faith. And I'm also given not only to transaction, but also to comparison. It's like, but Lord, look what they have. And Father, they don't even follow you like I do. Certainly, when we read the book of Psalms, we read about David, who said the same kind of thing. Lord, you know those evildoers? Smash their teeth in. They don't honor you like I do. And so we find ourselves in our human nature thinking in terms of comparing ourselves to others and thinking about the transactional natures in which if we are well-intentioned, then we should get good. This was the story of Peter when Jesus came to call him back at the end of the book of John to say to him, I know you denied me 3 times, but I'm also going to remind you 3 times that if you love me, Peter, you'll love what I love. And what I love is people. So he invites him, Peter, will you feed my sheep? Will you love people? Will you give yourself to people even when it's hard? And Peter says, Lord, I will. I'll fish for men and women. I will give myself to the work that you have called me to do. I'll leave these fishing nets and do what he did, which was to serve the Lord. And as we know from tradition, was not only crucified, but asked to be crucified upside down in Rome at the end of his life. In this occasion, though, he compares himself to the guy who's sitting across from him, John, and says, well, how's he going to die? I love that human feel of that's rooted right within the scriptures. Well, I could see that, I'm going to follow you, and that might be hard. Even if I'm led where I don't want to be led, and people clothe me in ways I don't get to pick my own clothes. But what's going to happen to him? Transaction and comparison. This is a part of our human nature. And Jesus says to him, will you walk out my calling for you? The rumor is that John never died, and the author makes it clear that's not what was happening here, but instead that John did die. But that the point was, as Jesus said, you fulfill your calling, Peter. What am I asking of you? I'm going to share with you today about an experience that I was asked to walk through, and some in this room walked through with us. It was not a pleasant experience, and I'm going to mostly read today from a manuscript, from a writing that I did some months ago. And it's because I hope you'll understand, even though that's not my normal way of preaching and delivery. I hope you'll understand that sometimes when you have something that's sensitive to say, something that's very vulnerable, you need something written in order to sort of help you walk through to make sure that you keep your britches between the ditches and not say something that you'll later wish you hadn't. So if you'll grant me that, I would like to share with you about this experience where I was fundamentally asking the question, was it worth it? I didn't get the transaction that I hoped for, and I was comparing myself with others and what they didn't seem to get. And it's as close as I've ever come to not keeping the faith, turning in my keys. So it goes like this. The question I hear you asking is this, said my counselor. Was it worth it? When I heard Dr. Call ask that question, I began to cry, sob really, the ugly kind of I can't control myself though I'm trying to kind of wailing. Even as I write about that session, I feel my body react, my breathing grows shallow, and my brain fades as the fog sets in. The loneliness I was experiencing and the anger surfacing with it was affecting our marriage and my wife. And Julie insisted I see someone professionally, and I did. The brutal truth of no longer being a part of nor feeling welcome in a faith community I and my family had faithfully served for 2 decades wasn't fading, and the well-intentioned advice of others, just move on, it wasn't working. I was serving as an associate pastor and member of a 5-person leadership team in evangelistically effective ministry that valued both relevance and discipleship. And foolishly, the governing body prematurely reinstated the senior pastor who was admittedly guilty of violating pastoral ethics. His actions included traveling to conferences with younger single women and inappropriate bantering by text. A backdrop to his disciplinary timeout prior to his reinstatement included ill-advised Facebook posts and time spent pastoring certain women. 2 examples of the unnecessary hurt his black sheep reputation created for this revitalizing Baptist church. Sidelined for only 6 months with a professional diagnosis of narcissism, histrionics, attention-seeking behavior, and rebellion, many who had benefited from his gifted teaching, along with some uninformed staff, clamored for his reinstatement as a lead pastor. And I, along with others, predicted he wasn't ready, and his return would spell ruin for him and that faith community. It did. 6 months later, with yet more misconduct, he was gone. You're not ready, I told him. You don't meet the qualifications of a ruling elder, not yet. Namely, I continued, you're not above reproach. You don't possess a good reputation among outsiders. It's also not good for you or your family, not good for me or mine. I insisted, and I know this, I concluded. Know this, the day before your first day reinstated as senior pastor will be my last day identifying as a pastor here. Despite these pleas to him, the staff, and the church's governing body, he was reinstated just days later. And my resignation there read as follows. I won't be part of a system that reinstates the authority of a senior pastor who has hurt the sheep in the way that his name withheld has. I confronted and protected him for too many years about the issue, and 4 months is not enough time to have confidence of changes that are necessary to reinstate him as the senior pastor. It is my perspective, I said, that the biblical qualifications of a church elder responsible for vision and spiritual direction as mandated in 1 Timothy 3 and Titus 1 are not justified in light of the weight of evidence this past season has revealed. And having heard your decision to reinstate, I humbly submit this letter of resignation. Following my voluntary stepping down, the author of 3 months severance was gracious. But the non-disclosure agreement insisting, quote, neither my spouse nor I discussed the circumstances leading up to, nor the reasons for our resignation that came with it wasn't. It wasn't gracious. It was harsh. It was ungodly. We refused to sign, in case you are wondering. To say this ending to a 2-decade ministry investment was painful is obvious. 8 more resignations followed mine. The decision, for all practical purposes, split that church. There was no goodbye, associate pastor and family. Thank you for your faithful service party. My family suffered, and their faith community no longer felt safe. We didn't move, and the reminders of this too common story are still frequent as we navigate doctor visits and grocery store aisles. The above account is a Reader's Digest version of circumstances that led to the emotional meltdown I described above when the professional therapist asked me, "So, was it worth it?" The sacrifices made to see people far from God become passionate followers of the ways of Jesus I was questioning. The reduced compensation of being paid through the year 65 to 70% of the senior pastor's salary, despite having more education and, in my opinion, working every bit as hard or harder. Was it worth it? Hearing the young couple I and my spouse invested 6 months of premarital counseling in, who were now attending a church down the street. Was it worth it? Knowing that key volunteers joined the tribe now known as nuns. Was it worth it? Hearing a parishioner say they are mad at you because they expected the senior pastor to act like a teenager, but they needed me to be the adult. Was it worth it? We come into vocational ministry and into our walk with Jesus with theological knowledge, head knowledge, that recognition and reward are at God's discretion for God's purposes. Of course, the foundation of our faith includes crucifixes, and at times we acknowledge evil wins. We know that outcomes do not determine the validity of fruitfulness. Our leader, Jesus, did not let outcomes decide his responses, and whether God leads us or lets us, he always uses it for good. All true. But these phrases and more are the fodder of Christianese, pastoral ministry courses, and conferences, and I found the lived experience more challenging than theory. Can I get an amen? When the hooey hit the fan, a shame spiral ensued in me. I felt embarrassed, guilty, and inadequate to know what to do when my boss's actions created chaos. It was complicated by a before the days of hashtag me too, hashtag church too, to know hashtag what to do. My part in the earlier years was to caution him, to get him to agree to some boundaries, and then to defend him to parishioners as him being unaware of professional expectations. And be sure that each time that his boss, the church board, knew what I knew, until I didn't. I stopped. I quit. I quit cautioning. I quit defending. I stopped. I didn't know what to do. My growing fear that what did happen was going to happen, along with my hopelessness that nothing could change, justified my I'm done defending or discussing his professional violations. The available evidence of his behavior, they said, wasn't egregious enough to clearly demand his termination, though in retrospect, of course, I think it was. And his response when confronted was remorse and his resolve to try harder and do better. Given my disappointment that his superiors, the church board, were asking me what ought to be done with the problem of his tarnishing reputation, I lacked the foresight to keep the responsibility theirs and quietly lost hope in change. With this impending crisis looming, as an introvert with an avoidant attachment, I isolated and withdrew. I mean that previous sentence as an explanation, not an excuse. When another incident occurred involving a husband threatening the senior pastor if he ever texted his wife again, I announced to him and my peers I was done defending his supposed naivete. trying to solve the problem, or I privately hoped for his resignation or evidence of scandal that was sufficient for his termination. And at the bottom rung of the shame spiral staircase was a severe anxiety rooted in small t traumas from my own younger self experiences growing up in a parsonage, watching the dismantling of my home church wrecked by a sexual scandal of an assistant pastor to my pastor dad. In retrospect, I have an empathy for the disappointment of those who couldn't understand why someone as capable as I had been to lead through other crises was unwilling and more unable to fix this crisis when some key ministry volunteers blew the whistle on our lead shepherds taking advantage of sheep entrusted to his care. Of course, they wouldn't understand my reactions. I didn't understand my reactions at the time. I only knew I was mad. I knew I didn't know what to do. I knew I wanted his selfish distractions to our mission to stop. I felt alone. I felt misunderstood, but mostly I was just numb. Now, what I'm about to say in this next part isn't rational. What I'm about to say isn't rational and not what I actually believed. But I'm giving an attempt to give words to a deep wrestling that was happening inside of me during that season. I wanted to convert to Catholicism. I wanted to go liturgical or to go to law school in my mid-50s. My gut wanted a clean break from what had been. I wanted to say that employing a culturally engaged, less assumptive, creative strategy was flawed, that evangelicalism had been a mistake. I wanted to say, oh, yeah, I now see the light. I should have given the first half of my life to what was better found in church tradition, not in the contemporary church world. I made a youthful mistake. I now see the light approach. It felt easier than reality. Because the reality is that I have a confidence in the theological and missiological foundations that undergirded the strategy we had employed. The problem wasn't the approach, nor the solution in a different denomination. The fact remained, very simply, the outcome was worse than a pizza with no cheese, and there wasn't a dadgum thing I could do to change it. Huh, aren't you glad you came today? Give us this day our daily bread. This little phrase from the model prayer of Jesus is gold to me now. I pray it daily. I refer to it often in conversation. Father, give us this day our daily bread. I don't know what I need. I don't have what it takes to not go bitter. I can't discern that fine line between the disgust I feel and the unforgiveness you forbid. I'm embarrassed that my mind races and my body faints when I encounter a former church board member who with others made a costly decision to reinstate the perpetrator and authorize a necessary and authorize a non-disclosure agreement. Lord, give me this day the sustenance necessary, my daily bread, to ultimately not only conclude it wasn't worth it, but I quit. What about him? What about the transaction? What about the if I do, then you'll do? Dear God, of course, the daily bread we need comes in a variety of shapes, sizes, and flours. Here's a metaphor. Just like there's bagel choices down the street here, including Asiago cheese and pumpernickel, there's podcasts and books. While bread comes baked, like ciabatta or fried like tortilla chips, daily bread for me in my hardest season came in forms that are universally recognized as essential. Continuing to tell my story more authentically and making peace with how it shapes was crucial in every season. Now, my spouse was a gift and is the most capable mentor I know. Her questions, coaching, and modeling are my greatest asset. My children cheered me on and reminded me it was more than okay to be human. And Lanny and Scott and Steve were therapy professionals I needed to plow the soil and plant some seeds my soul desperately needed. 1 John, 2 John, 3 John, not the books of the Bible, but the order in which I came to know these ministry partners. Scott and Jed are ministry peers that I met and meet with every Thursday morning and listen with empathy as we resolve together to not shove it where the sun don't shine like I was tempted to do, particularly during the 3 years that included the events described. God used them to keep me on the operating table until some good work he had planned for me was completed. Other resources like Emmanuel Journaling, Embracing Any Emotion, and Cheering Mizzou Football, all these resources and more are gifts that God provides to live through our hardest seasons and tools I still engage to stay healthy. But the point of this message is not to recount those resources, nor to encourage you in them. They can be found quite easily if you're willing to engage them, as hard or as expensive as some of them may be. The point of what I'm saying today is how God showed up in daily bread in unexpected ways to give witness that my Heavenly Father was with me. And his provisions to sustain us are what we need because he knows us intimately. Let me summarize these musings by recounting a bagel bite of daily bread that Heavenly Father gave me as I was processing what I've read to you today. I was minding my own business, walking through the living room, when I overheard my adult daughter say a phrase to her mother in a conversation I wasn't even participating in. The comment wasn't said in my presence. I don't know the context in which it was said. It doesn't matter. But when I heard it, I had a spiritual encounter with God. I still digest it like manna, and its nourishment is sustaining me still. I know without a doubt God gave it, as he has done so many times before, for him to keep me tender, surrendered, and keeping the faith. What I overheard her say was this, the phrase, was it worth it? It wasn't worth less. Not the word worthless, worth less. So what's the difference? Worthless has that transactional, performative value. Do the benefits outweigh the cost? Worth less signals a relational value. It validates my motivations on my better days when I pastored from a heart of love. Worth less reminds me of the heart of the Father who called and invited me into this pastoral life. The value of greater intimacy with God is of inestimable worth. It wasn't worth less, even when I doubt if it's worth it at all. We can be transactional and comparing, and all the way back at the end of the book of John, in the recalling of Peter, we find Jesus saying, will you fulfill your calling? Will we do our work? Even if it involves crucifixion, disappointment, lack of appreciation or reward? Putting a value on the worthiness of the lived experience of what life with God asks remains interrogative rather than declarative. Putting a value on the worthiness of the lived experience of what life with God asks remains for me more interrogative than it is declarative. I ask more questions than make statements. Was it worth it? Depends on the time or the day you ask. Now, don't get me wrong. We live in a great house, in a great community, and probably enough income to last this lifetime, maybe. And the work we do through our resource center allows us to be the mentors we always wish we'd had and work at a pace that's appropriate for the age that we are. And in short, life is quite good. While outcomes that include institutional stability, a retirement party, or a published bestseller would be awesome, it's not looking like those things are in the cards for me. I do know the benefits of a good reputation and the gratitude of some for the hours of pastoral counseling or even sharing a sermon that changed the trajectory of a person's life. Ministry wasn't worthless, but the loneliness leading to despair that landed me in that therapy session where Steve asked, was it worth it? Still finds me grieving the losses described above. What is more certain after walking through that hard season is it wasn't worth less. When I consider the implications of that phrase, it wasn't worth less, I know now the freedom of words that used to elude me. I now know the beautiful words like, I don't know. I feel disgusted. I need help. Or the big one, I don't have the capacity to do that. I now know how his strength is made perfect in my weakness. I'm more gentle with me now when I can't do anything but nod when I bump into a former staff member who I let make me responsible for the chaos others created. Without minimizing the sacrifice that our leader made in his sacrifice, which invites our sacrifice for others, it wasn't worth less because his daily bread is himself. I know now I'm not alone. I never was. These words from my playlist, aptly titled Soul Cry, are the words that the ironically but the incomparable Whitney Houston sang. As I lay me down, heaven hear me now, she sang, I'm lost without a cause after giving it my all. Winter storms have come and darkened my sun. After all that I've been through, who on earth can I turn to? And then there's a refrain in which Whitney says, oh Lord, I look to you. After all my strength is gone, in you I can be strong. I look to you, and when melodies are gone, in you I hear a song. I look to you. So let me ask you now, is it worth it? When you see others do bad and seem to flourish, is it worth it? Is it worth it when you serve sacrificially and struggle to buy groceries? Is it worth it? Is it worth it? A relative acts like a heathen and the family caters. You speak up to address the bad behavior and you get verbally accosted. Can I ask you, is it worth it? Is it worth it? You show up to work on time. Is it worth it? You say your prayers at night. Is it worth it? You keep your promises. Is it worth it? Was it worth it? Our capital E example lived a life without sin. Was it worth it? Our example didn't have a place to call his own. Was it worth it? Our example was betrayed by a friend named Judas. Was it worth it? He was wrongly accused of treason and tried without a jury. Was it worth it? He was beaten, mocked, and died a cruel death on a cross. Was it worth it? His so-called best friends ran. Thomas left the country to hide. Was it worth it? His body lay in a cold tomb and his spirit was at rest. Was it worth it? He rose from the dead. Was it worth it? He saved us from a meaningless life. Was it worth it? He promised to return. Will it be worth it? He asks us to be faithful with our part, regardless of our circumstances, regardless of the transaction or the comparison. Is it worth it? Will it be worth it? He told us it wouldn't be easy. That we might get the blessing of that we might not get the blessing of father, mother, and siblings. But will it be worth it? He said this world is in our final home and that he is preparing mansions for us to live in. Will it be worth it? For those who don't quit, for those who stay tender-hearted, for those who run their race, we get to hear him say, well done, good and faithful servant, enter into the joy of the Lord. Will it be worth it? There's a great cloud of witnesses that are cheering us on from the balcony of heaven, and they are inviting us to finish well. So I ask you, will it be worth it? As the band comes, I say to you, I don't know for sure. But I know this, it wasn't worth less. And I close with telling you this short story. I called my mother from college and said, Mom, I quit. I'm coming home. To which she wisely replied, well, you can do that, Rodney, but it seems to me it'd be a lot easier for you to stay and finish than to come home and try to tell everybody why you didn't.